The galaxy was a vast and cold place where hundreds of species lived, each with their own civilizations and empires. But not all races received equal attention. The Threlk, a peaceful and fragile species with glowing translucent skin and luminous patterns across their bodies, had once flourished on the beautiful world of Lunvian 6. Their planet was rich in resources, and their people were known for their wisdom and their ability to adapt to energy fields like no other species. But that was before the galaxy began expanding. The Lunvian 6 that the Threlk once called home had begun to lose its resources, and the great empires that ruled the stars began to show less interest in the small planet. The Threlk, though intelligent, were seen as too weak, too peaceful to offer much in terms of military strength or material wealth. As the larger civilizations continued their search for power and resources, the Threlk were left behind, abandoned, and ignored. Over time, Lunvian 6 began to suffer. The once green fields turned brown, the clear skies became filled with ash, and the oceans began to dry up. The Threlk tried to reach out for help, sending messages across the stars to anyone who would listen, but their cries fell on deaf ears. The galaxy moved on, leaving the Threlk to fade into obscurity. The Vargathi Dominion, one of the most powerful empires in the galaxy, had been one of the first to pass judgment on the Threlk. Their scouts had noted the planet's shrinking resources and marked Lunvian 6 as a world of no value. Over time, their empire built vast military ships that patrolled the borders of their space, looking for any valuable resources. The Threlk were not worth their time. But one day the humans arrived. Captain Elias Carter, a respected officer in the United Earth Navy, UEN, was the commander of the exploration vessel Fortitude. The ship had been on a peaceful mission to chart unknown parts of the galaxy when they stumbled upon Lunvian 6. Initially, it was just another stop, a quiet world that seemed like nothing more than a barren planet. But as they approached the surface, something caught their eye. There were signs of life, weak signals. It wasn't long before Carter and his crew discovered the truth. The planet had once been home to a thriving civilization, but now it was a shadow of its former self. The Threlk had managed to survive in small, scattered colonies, but they were starving. Their resources were gone, their homes destroyed, and they had been fighting off raiders and scavengers who came to take whatever little remained. It was a tragic sight, a people forgotten by the rest of the galaxy. The humans could have easily walked away. They could have ignored the distress signals and continued on their mission, as so many other civilizations had done. But Captain Carter could not turn his back. The Threlk had been abandoned, and it was clear to him that if humanity did not step in, they would soon be wiped out. "I won't leave them to die," Carter told his crew, his voice firm as he looked over the data. "We've been given the chance to help them. We can't turn our backs on them now." The crew of the Fortitude agreed. As the first humans to make contact with the Threlk, they took it upon themselves to provide aid, no matter the cost. They brought food, medical supplies, and whatever technology they could offer to help the Threlk rebuild. It wasn't much, but it was a start. However, as the days passed, it became clear that humanity's intervention was not going to be easy. The Threlk were deeply distrustful. Their history of being ignored had made them wary of outsiders, and they had learned to survive on their own, even when it seemed impossible. Many Threlk didn't trust the humans at first. They had been let down too many times before. But as time went on, something started to change. The Threlk saw the humans' sincerity. They saw how Captain Carter and his crew worked tirelessly to help them, never asking for anything in return. Slowly, the Threlk began to open up. They shared their knowledge of the planet and their advanced understanding of energy fields. It became clear that the Threlk weren't just weak. They were brilliant in ways that no one had ever realized. In the quiet of the night, the Threlk would tell the humans their stories of how their civilization had once prospered, how they had once lived in harmony with nature, and how they had been forgotten by the stars. The humans, in turn, shared their stories of Earth, a planet that had once been on the brink of destruction, but had found a way to rebuild. They shared their dreams of a better future, where no one would be left behind. Captain Carter sat with the elders of the Threlk one evening, under the stars. He looked up at the sky, knowing that the path ahead would not be easy. The galaxy had ignored the Threlk for too long, but humanity would not. The humans had made a decision. They would help the Threlk survive, even if it meant standing up to the larger, more powerful empires who had abandoned them. "This is just the beginning," Carter said quietly, the weight of his words settling over the small group. "We'll help you rebuild, and we'll make sure the galaxy sees what you're capable of." And so, the humans and Threlk began to form a bond, one that would change the galaxy forever. The Threlk might have been forgotten by everyone else, but for the first time in centuries, they felt hope once again. Captain Elias Carter stood at the bridge of the Fortitude, his eyes fixed on the stars outside. He could see the glint of distant galaxies, some of them full of vibrant civilizations, while others, like Lunvian 6, seemed quiet, abandoned, and lost to time. He had made a promise to the Threlk. He had promised to protect them. But as more days passed, it was becoming clearer. The situation was far more complicated than he had first imagined. The humans had begun bringing in supplies, food, medical assistance, and technology to help the Threlk. Slowly, their confidence began to grow. The Threlk were starting to trust the humans, opening up about their lost history and brilliant understanding of energy fields. What they didn't expect, though, was the sudden reaction from the rest of the galaxy. While the Threlk were accepting the aid with gratitude, the Vargathi Dominion, a massive and powerful empire, took notice of the humans' actions. The Vargathi were known for their strict and cold logic. They had long ago classified Lunvian 6 as a planet of no use, no resources, no military advantage. To them, it was just a small, forgotten world, and the Threlk were nothing more than a weak, insignificant race. The Vargathi Council, however, was not pleased. News had spread quickly about humanity's involvement with the Threlk, and the Dominion's leaders were furious. It wasn't just that humans were helping a weak race. It was that they were interfering with the natural order of things. The Vargathi had no interest in helping the Threlk, but they certainly didn't want the humans gaining influence over them. An emergency meeting of the Vargathi fleet commanders was called, and Grand Admiral Valgur, a towering figure of authority, was selected to handle the human situation. With his sleek black armor and cold eyes, Valgur looked over the tactical maps, his sharp voice cutting through the room. "The humans are meddling in matters that do not concern them," Valgur said, his tone unwavering. "They are soft. They will never be able to hold the line against us. Let us send a message, a warning." But not all the Vargathi agreed. Some of the younger fleet commanders, who had recently seen the humans in action, were less certain. "The humans are unpredictable," one of them argued. "Their technology is primitive compared to ours, but they have something we cannot understand: determination. I've seen it in their eyes. They'll defend those Threlk to the last man." Despite this warning, Valgur and the more conservative commanders decided to move forward with a show of force. The Vargathi Dominion would send a small fleet to Lunvian 6 to confront the humans. A warning shot. Nothing too dangerous, but enough to send a message. Humanity needed to learn its place. Meanwhile, back on Lunvian 6, Captain Carter was reviewing the latest intelligence from the Threlk. Their technology, while far behind that of the Vargathi, had potential. They had learned to adapt to energy fields in ways that no other species could. They had been too humble, too quiet for far too long. And now they were beginning to show Carter the strength of their minds. Carter knew the time was coming. He knew the Vargathi would react. He had always been prepared for conflict, but he wasn't going to let the Threlk suffer again, not on his watch. As the Vargathi fleet approached, Carter gathered his crew for a strategy meeting. The room was tense, the weight of the decision hanging over them. They could retreat, avoid confrontation, and protect the Threlk in other ways. But that wasn't what they were going to do. Captain Carter had already made his choice. We will stand our ground, Carter said firmly. The Threlk need us now more than ever. If we run, if we back down, we send a message that we're weak. We are not weak. He looked at each member of his crew, their faces reflecting the same determination he felt. We fight because it's the right thing to do. There were no objections. Carter's crew understood what was at stake. They had seen the Threlk's gratitude, their trust in humanity, and they weren't about to let that be taken away. They would defend the Threlk, not just because it was their mission, but because they believed in the cause. As the Vargathi fleet arrived in orbit, the tension in the air thickened. Captain Carter gave the command to power up the ship's weapons. But it wasn't to attack. It was to defend, to show the Vargathi that humanity would not be intimidated. The Fortitude positioned itself in front of the Threlk colonies, blocking the way. The humans would not back down. The Vargathi fleet hailed the humans, their voice cold and authoritative. This is your final warning, humans. Leave the Threlk and return to your pathetic planet. Captain Carter didn't hesitate. We're not leaving. The Threlk are under our protection now. You will leave them alone. There was a moment of silence, followed by a low, almost amused chuckle from the Vargathi commander. You are foolish, human. You are not prepared for the storm you've invited. But Carter's response was simple. We're prepared for whatever comes our way. And with that, the line in the sand had been drawn. Humanity would fight, not for conquest, but to protect those who had no voice. They had already made their stand, and they were not going to back down. The Vargathi fleet hung in orbit, casting their cold shadows over Lunvian 6. Captain Elias Carter stood on the bridge of the Fortitude, watching the Vargathi warships as they positioned themselves. Their sheer size and power were impossible to ignore, but Carter had made his decision. He had drawn the line in the sand. The Threlk would not be abandoned again, not while humanity had the will to fight for them. You know what to do, Carter said to his first officer, Lieutenant Sarah Green. Her eyes were steady, the calm in the storm. We're ready, Captain, she replied. Weapons are primed, shields are at full strength, and we've made contact with the Threlk. They're standing by. A soft buzz of confirmation filled the room as the crew worked in unison, preparing for what was sure to be the most difficult challenge they'd faced. Carter's mind was sharp, but beneath it, a seed of doubt began to sprout. The Vargathi weren't just a challenge of might. They were a force that had dominated the galaxy for centuries. Could humanity, with its relatively young fleet, stand against such power? Would they have enough time to defend the Threlk, or would they be swept aside like so many before them? The answer came sooner than he expected. A voice from the comm system crackled through the room. This is your final warning, humans. Step aside and leave the Threlk to us. They are nothing but a dead race. Your foolish interference will only bring you ruin. The Vargathi admiral's tone was cold, impersonal, like a man telling someone to clear away the trash. Carter didn't flinch. He looked toward his crew, whose faces were set with unwavering determination. We will not step aside, Carter said, his voice clear and firm. The Threlk are under our protection, and we're not leaving. The Vargathi fleet commander's voice returned, colder than before. Then you will face the consequences. The channel was abruptly closed, and the tension on the bridge was thick enough to cut with a knife. There was no turning back now. Battle stations, Carter ordered, his voice rising over the hum of the engines. The crew sprang into action, each person understanding their role. Lieutenant Green focused on the tactical display, coordinating with the nearby human fleets and Threlk allies who had quietly begun to organize their defenses. The Threlk, once helpless and ignored, now had human guidance and technology at their side. Carter's hands tightened around the controls as the Vargathi fleet began to make their move. Their ships, sleek and powerful, fired first. Energy beams, shooting from their massive weapons, aimed directly at the Fortitude. Shields up, Green shouted. The ship rocked as the first blast hit, but the human technology held strong. The Fortitude shuddered, but the shields absorbed the impact without breaking. Carter's grip on the armrest tightened, but he didn't speak. The humans had faced worse before. They would face this, too. "Return fire," Carter commanded. The crew let loose a series of return blasts. While the Vargathi warships were faster and more powerful, humanity had an advantage the Vargathi did not: creativity. The humans had learned how to use energy fields in ways the Vargathi had not anticipated. The Threlk, with their advanced understanding of energy, had worked alongside the humans to develop a new strategy. The energy blasts from the Fortitude weren't just fired in a straight line. They bent and twisted, using the very same energy fields that the Threlk had mastered. It was a gamble. It wasn't perfect, but it was working. The Vargathi ships struggled to adjust, their massive weapons sometimes missing their targets by inches. The humans were faster, more unpredictable, and they weren't fighting alone. "Prepare the energy dampeners, Lieutenant," Carter ordered. The Threlk had worked with the human engineers to develop a new kind of defense, an energy dampener that would disrupt the flow of energy in the Vargathi weapons. If it worked, it could turn the tide of the battle. Green nodded and activated the dampeners. A low hum filled the ship, followed by a sudden, sharp pulse of energy that shot outward. The Vargathi fleet was caught off guard. Their weapons flickered, their ships began to stagger as the dampener disrupted the energy flow. "Now's our chance," Carter shouted. The Fortitude shot forward, dodging enemy blasts and positioning itself in front of the Threlk colonies. The human ships, armed with weapons enhanced by the Threlk's technology, unleashed a barrage of fire. It wasn't a full-blown assault, just enough to keep the Vargathi at bay. The battle raged for what felt like hours. Every move counted. Every decision mattered. Carter watched as his crew worked tirelessly, showing no sign of fatigue, their eyes filled with a singular purpose: to protect the Threlk. But the Vargathi weren't giving up easily. Their fleet had sustained damage, but they had the numbers and the firepower to keep fighting. The battle had become a deadlock. "We're holding," Green said, her voice tight with both exhaustion and relief. "We're keeping them at a distance." But Carter knew it wouldn't last. The Vargathi were relentless, and their reinforcements would be arriving soon. Humanity's fleet, though brave and determined, was small compared to the Dominion's. The fight for Lunvian 6 was far from over. Carter glanced toward the Threlk, who were watching from their colonies, hoping that the humans would prevail. Their glowing eyes filled with determination. It was clear they were ready to fight alongside the humans, not as weaklings, but as partners. As the battle raged on, one thing became clear: humanity would not back down. They had made a promise to protect the Threlk, and they would fight to the very end to keep that promise. The battle raged on above Lunvian 6. The humans aboard the Fortitude and their Threlk allies fought with all their might, holding off the relentless assault of the Vargathi fleet. Captain Elias Carter had never seen such a desperate struggle. The Fortitude's shields flickered with every blast, but the crew remained determined. They had made their stand, and they would not yield. Despite the damage to the Vargathi fleet, the Dominion's forces were overwhelming. Their ships were faster, stronger, and their firepower was unmatched. As much as the humans had adapted, it was clear they couldn't keep up forever. Carter knew the battle would not be won by force alone. They needed something more, something the Vargathi hadn't expected. "Lieutenant Green," Carter said, his voice tight but calm, "have we heard from Commander Joran yet?" Green glanced at the communication panel, her face etched with concern. "No response, Captain. I've tried reaching him multiple times, but the signal's been disrupted by the Vargathi jammer." "Damn it," Carter muttered under his breath. He had been hoping for the Threlk's hidden allies to come through, but their communication efforts were being blocked by the Vargathi. Joran, a Threlk leader, had told them that other Threlk colonies on nearby moons had agreed to assist them, but they were still a distance away, and the Vargathi had fortified the area with their own ships. Just as Carter was about to give another order, a crackling sound broke through the comm system. A voice came through, faint and distant, but clear enough to be understood. "This is Commander Joran. We are inbound, Captain." Carter's heart skipped a beat. "You're coming in now?" he asked, his voice filled with urgency. "We've bypassed the Vargathi blockade. They've underestimated us," Joran replied, a hint of pride in his voice. "Our ships are ready. We'll be with you in minutes." Carter's face lit up. "Hold steady, Commander. We're doing everything we can to keep them off you." The arrival of Joran's fleet could change the tide of the battle. The Threlk weren't a military power, but their knowledge of energy and their hidden ships, which had been kept under wraps for centuries, were a powerful advantage. With their help, the humans might have a chance to break through the Vargathi's overwhelming forces. "Prepare for incoming allies," Carter ordered, turning to his crew. "We can't afford to let the Vargathi regroup. Once Joran's fleet arrives, we'll need to focus our fire on their capital ship." Green nodded, already issuing orders to the other ships in their fleet. The Fortitude was ready. The humans had held their own for long enough. But now they had reinforcements coming. The battle was far from over, but it was shifting in their favor. As the minutes passed, the tension on the bridge grew. Carter's eyes never left the viewport, watching as the battle around Lunvian 6 continued. The Vargathi were relentless, their ships closing in on the Fortitude with every passing second. It was clear they were preparing for a final push to break through the human defenses. Carter's grip tightened on the console. "Brace for impact," Green called, her voice suddenly sharp. The Fortitude rocked as another Vargathi energy blast slammed into the shields, knocking the ship sideways. The lights flickered, and alarms blared as the ship struggled to stay steady. "Report," Carter barked. "We've sustained damage to the starboard side, Captain. Shields are holding, but they're weakening," Green responded, her voice calm but strained. Just as Carter prepared to give the order to adjust their shields, a new sound cut through the chaos, the unmistakable hum of approaching ships. Carter turned, his heart racing. He could see them now, streaking across the sky. Joran's fleet, small but fast, the Threlk ships darted through the Vargathi fire, their sleek designs allowing them to evade the larger warships. They weren't heavily armed, but their speed and agility were unmatched. The Vargathi fleet immediately shifted their focus, attempting to adjust to the new threat. The humans had bought enough time. Joran's fleet joined the fray, quickly closing in on the Vargathi capital ship. With a coordinated effort, the Threlk ships began to unleash a devastating barrage of energy pulses, targeting the weak points in the Vargathi armor. "Now," Carter shouted. With the Vargathi forces distracted, the Fortitude and the rest of the human ships focused their fire on the Dominion's capital ship. The Threlk and humans worked together, their strategies merging into a perfect dance of destruction. The Vargathi fleet began to fall back, their ships suffering damage they hadn't expected. The fight was far from over, but it was clear now who had the upper hand. "Keep pushing. Don't let up," Carter ordered, watching as the Fortitude fired another round of energy blasts at the Vargathi ships. They were retreating, but it wasn't over. The Threlk and humans had to be sure. As the battle waged on, Carter felt a strange sense of hope. The Threlk had never stood a chance alone, but now they were fighting back. Together, humanity and the Threlk had formed an unexpected alliance, and it was proving to be a force stronger than anyone had imagined. They had come from different worlds, different histories, but together, they were a force to be reckoned with. "Captain," Green said, her voice tinged with relief, "the Vargathi are retreating. They're pulling back." Carter allowed himself a small smile. "We did it, but don't let your guard down. They'll come back, stronger next time." The Threlk fleet, with the help of the humans, had driven the Vargathi back. For now, Lunvian 6 was safe, but Carter knew the battle wasn't over. This victory was just the beginning. The galaxy had seen the strength of humanity and the Threlk, and it would not be forgotten. The battle above Lunvian 6 had come to an unexpected end. The Vargathi fleet, battered and retreating, had withdrawn from the area, leaving behind a trail of broken ships and wounded warriors. The humans, alongside their Threlk allies, had won the day, against all odds. As the Fortitude floated in the quiet aftermath, the crew took a collective breath. Their mission wasn't over, but the immediate danger had passed. Captain Elias Carter stood on the bridge, watching the glowing stars outside as they flickered in the vast emptiness of space. There was still much to do, but for the moment, he allowed himself a brief moment of relief. "Status report, Lieutenant Green," Carter said, his voice calm but still filled with urgency. Green, sitting at the tactical console, looked over the data. "The Vargathi have pulled back for now, Captain. Their damaged ships are retreating to their border, but we're not sure if they'll regroup or call for reinforcements." Carter nodded, already anticipating the worst. He knew the Vargathi wouldn't give up so easily. But for now, Lumvian 6 was safe, and that was what mattered most. "Good," Carter said. "Keep monitoring their movements. We need to know if they're going to send anything else our way." At the back of the bridge, Commander Joran stood, observing the humans as they moved around the ship. The Threlk had been mostly quiet since the battle, but their glowing eyes had softened with gratitude. Joran had led his people into battle alongside the humans, and it had been a victory, but there was still much to be done. "Captain," Joran began, stepping forward, his voice steady but tinged with concern. "We've won this round, but the Vargathi are not likely to forget this. They may be regrouping even now." Carter turned to face him. "I know. We've just bought some time. But time is all we need." Joran didn't seem convinced. He had seen the power of the Vargathi firsthand, and knew that they were more determined than ever to regain control. "Our alliance is still young, Captain. The Vargathi will see this as a challenge, and they will retaliate." Carter's eyes hardened. "Let them come. We're ready." The Threlk had been an ancient, peaceful race. They had once built great cities and civilizations, but after centuries of war and decay, they had been forgotten by the galaxy. The Vargathi had wiped out most of their kind, and left the rest to disappear into obscurity. But the humans had found them. And now the Threlk had something they had lost. Hope. Carter had given them a reason to fight back. "Humanity has always been underestimated," Carter said. "We fight for what's right, not because it's easy, but because we know what's worth protecting. And the Threlk are worth protecting." Joran's glowing eyes studied Carter for a moment. Then he nodded slowly. "I have seen your people fight. I now understand why the galaxy speaks of you with both fear and respect. Perhaps we are not so different after all." The moment was interrupted by a soft beeping from Green's console. She turned quickly to Carter. "Captain, we've received an encrypted message. It's from the Vargathi Council." Carter exchanged a glance with Joran. "Patch it through." The screen flickered, and soon a stern figure appeared. The Vargathi Admiral, Valgur, was not one to waste time on pleasantries. His sharp voice cut through the room. "Captain Elias Carter, this is your last warning. You and your allies have made a grave mistake. The Vargathi Dominion will not forget what you have done here today. Your efforts will only bring more suffering. Stand down and leave the Threlk to us, or you will face the full wrath of the Dominion ****. Carter felt the weight of Valgur's words, but his resolve only grew stronger. "You've underestimated humanity, Admiral. We're not afraid of you." There was a cold silence before Valgur's voice returned. "Then prepare yourselves, humans. You will regret this." The screen went dark, and Carter let out a slow breath. "So it begins." Joran stepped forward, his posture stiff with a mix of determination and worry. "The Vargathi will not stop. They will come for us all, and they will be relentless." Carter nodded. "I've never backed down from a fight, and neither have the Threlk. We've won today, but the war is far from over." The atmosphere on the bridge grew heavy as the crew prepared for what was to come. The Vargathi were a massive empire, and they would not allow their defeat to stand. Carter knew that humanity and the Threlk would have to stand together if they hoped to survive the coming storm. "We need to prepare," Carter said, turning to Green. "Strengthen the shields, double-check the weapons, and get in touch with our allies. We're going to need every hand we can get." Green immediately began giving orders, while Joran turned to his people, relaying Carter's command. The Threlk, once a race of peace and isolation, were beginning to transform. With the humans at their side, they had found a new strength. They would fight, not just to survive, but to protect the things that mattered most. As Carter stood, watching the crew move with precision, he felt a deep sense of unity. The humans and the Threlk were two species that had once been at odds with the galaxy, but together, they were a force that could not be ignored. The Vargathi Dominion had sent its warning, but now, the humans and the Threlk were ready to face whatever came next. They would fight for freedom, for peace, and for each other. The storm was coming, but the line had already been drawn. They would not back down. Days had passed since the Vargathi's warning, and the Fortitude remained in orbit around Lunvian 6, standing guard alongside the Threlk ships. The Vargathi had not returned yet, but the calm before the storm was unnerving. The crew of the Fortitude knew that this was only the beginning. The Vargathi Dominion never forgot their defeats. Soon, they would be back with even greater strength. Captain Elias Carter stood on the bridge, watching the stars twinkle in the dark void of space. He could feel the weight of the decision ahead. The choice to continue this fight, knowing the consequences. The Threlk had been silent for the past few hours, their ships stationary. It was as if they were waiting for something, but Carter didn't know what. Lieutenant Green entered the bridge, her face serious. "Captain, we've received a message from the Allied Council. They're requesting a meeting." Carter raised an eyebrow. "What do they want?" "They want to discuss reinforcements and strategy," Green replied, her tone cautious. "They believe the Vargathi will return soon. We'll need to be prepared." Carter took a deep breath. The Allied Council had been formed after the initial battle, bringing together various species who had seen the threat of the Vargathi and now sought to join forces against them. But with so many different voices and viewpoints, coordinating them would be a challenge. There were factions within the council, some wanting peace, others looking for a more aggressive stance. Carter had seen this before. Political squabbles during war only made things more difficult. "Set up the meeting," Carter ordered. "Let's hear what they have to say." A few moments later, the holographic display flickered to life, showing representatives from various species. A Mekthar, an insectoid race known for their strength in numbers. A Lunari, a species of skilled engineers and tacticians. And the HFY Sci, a race of telepathic beings who had long kept to themselves, preferring isolation over conflict. "Captain Carter," said the Mekthar representative, a tall, imposing figure with sharp mandibles, "the Vargathi will not let this go. You may have won one battle, but they will strike again. We must take action now to prevent their retaliation." Carter held his ground, his eyes locked on the Mekthar's form. "I agree, but how do we proceed? The Vargathi are formidable. We can't just rush in without a plan." The Lunari representative, a tall humanoid with glowing blue skin, leaned forward. "Our resources are limited. We cannot afford to lose more ships. We suggest reinforcing the Fortitude and other human vessels, as they have proven to be effective. But we must also consider defending the Threlk colonies. They are vulnerable." Carter nodded. The Threlk had been living in the shadow of the Vargathi's dominance for centuries. Their people had been scattered, hidden in remote colonies. Now that they were part of this fight, they needed the humans' protection more than ever. Before Carter could respond, the HFY Sci representative spoke up in a voice that seemed to echo directly in his mind. "We can offer something more than just defense. We have the ability to locate Vargathi movements before they even arrive. But it requires trust. Trust in us, Captain Carter." The room fell silent as everyone turned to the HFY Sci representative. Trust. That was the key. The HFY Sci were known for their telepathic abilities, and they had always kept their powers hidden from the rest of the galaxy. But now, they were offering to share their gift. In exchange, they wanted something. Trust. Carter was hesitant. How do we know you won't betray us? The Turvsay's deep blue eyes softened. We do not seek betrayal. We seek balance. The Vargethi cannot be allowed to continue their tyranny. We have seen the suffering they cause, and we do not wish to see the same fate befall your people or the Threlk. Carter looked to Green and Joran, who were standing nearby. They had been silent during the meeting, letting Carter handle the negotiations, but now they exchanged a look. What do you think? Carter asked them. Joran stepped forward, his glowing eyes full of a quiet intensity. I believe they speak the truth. The Threlk have seen what the Vargethi can do. If the HFY can help us locate the enemy before they strike, it could turn the tide in our favor. Green nodded. I agree. If we can predict their movements, we can be ready. It gives us a fighting chance. Carter turned back to the HFY representative. Then it's settled. We'll trust you, but remember, if you betrayed us. The HFY raised a hand. We understand, Captain. We will honor this alliance. With a decision made, the meeting continued, but Carter's mind was already on the next steps. Reinforcements would arrive soon, and they had to prepare for the Vargethi's inevitable return. The humans, the Threlk, and now the HFY had joined forces. They were more than ready for the coming war, but Carter knew that the Vargethi would not be so easily defeated. As the meeting ended and the holograms disappeared, Carter turned to his crew. Prepare the fleet. The Vargethi are coming. We'll be ready this time. The Fortitude was ready. The crew had proven themselves in battle, and now they had the trust of new allies. But the storm was far from over. The Vargethi would return, and when they did, it would be a fight like no other. The time had come. The Fortitude, alongside the Threlk ships and their newly allied forces, had gathered at the outskirts of the Vargethi dominion. For weeks, the galaxy had held its breath. And now, it was time to face the enemy once and for all. Captain Elias Carter stood on the bridge, staring at the holographic map that displayed their position in the galaxy. The Vargethi were near, very near. He could feel the weight of the decision on his shoulders. This wasn't just a battle for Lunvian 6. It was a battle for the future of every species that had rallied against the Vargethi. Lieutenant Green was at her console, her fingers flying across the controls as she relayed orders to the fleet. The tension in the air was palpable. Every member of the crew knew that this would be the hardest fight they had ever faced. The Vargethi were not to be underestimated, but with their allies, the humans and Threlk had a chance. Captain, Green said, her voice steady but tinged with nervousness. We've picked up Vargethi ships, several fleets approaching. They're coming in fast. Carter nodded. Ready the fleet. All ships are to hold position. No one moves until I give the order. The Threlk ships, sleek and fast, circled around the Fortitude, their engines humming with energy. Beside them were the Mechthar, their imposing insectoid ships designed for heavy combat. The Lunari vessels, with their advanced technology, sat just behind, ready to provide support. We've got this, Carter muttered under his breath, even though doubt lingered in the back of his mind. The Vargethi were powerful, their technology unmatched, but there was something about the unity of the Allied forces that made Carter believe they had a fighting chance. As the enemy fleet appeared on the edge of the system, Commander Joran approached, his glowing eyes reflecting the same steely determination as Carter's. The Vargethi have underestimated us, Captain. They thought the Threlk were too weak to fight back, but we are not the same people we were. Carter turned to face Joran, his expression hard. We've all come a long way. It's time to show them what we can do. The Vargethi ships filled the screen. Thousands of them, massive, intimidating warships that seemed to take up the entire space. The Dominion's fleet was like a tidal wave, each ship radiating power, a clear reminder of their dominance over the galaxy. But Carter wasn't afraid. He had the strength of his allies behind him. Green, Carter said, His voice filled with command. "Target their flagship. Let's start this." "Aye, Captain," Green responded, her fingers moving swiftly across her console. The first wave of Vargathi ships launched their attack. Energy blasts and missiles erupted from the enemy fleet, streaking across the vastness of space toward the Allied forces. The Fortitude shook as the shields absorbed the brunt of the attack. "Shields holding at 75%, Green reported, her voice steady despite the chaos. "They're coming in strong, Captain." "Return fire," Carter ordered. "Target their engines. We need to slow them down." The Fortitude's weapons flared to life, unleashing a barrage of energy beams at the Vargathi ships. The Threlk and Mekthar ships followed suit, their weapons cutting through the enemy lines. The first few Vargathi ships exploded, their massive frames disintegrating in a blaze of light. But the Vargathi were relentless. They fought back with a fury, their fleet pushing forward with relentless precision. One by one, the enemy ships fired back, their blasts tearing into the shields of the Fortitude. "We're taking hits to the starboard side," Green shouted. "Shields are weakening." Carter gritted his teeth. The Vargathi were attacking in waves, overwhelming their defenses. He needed to act fast, or they would be crushed. He glanced at Joran. "We need to use the Sci's abilities." "Now," Carter said, "activate the telepathic scanners." Joran nodded. The Sci had been working on a plan, using their telepathic powers to locate weak spots in the Vargathi fleet before the enemy even moved. They had to trust in the Sci's abilities if they were to survive this battle. With a mental command, the Sci began their work, their glowing eyes closing as they focused their energy. Their ship's weapons began to fire in perfect synchronization, hitting the weak points of the Vargathi ships before they could even react. The tide was turning. "We've got them on the run," Green exclaimed. "The Vargathi flagship is losing power. They're retreating." But just as victory seemed within reach, a massive shadow loomed. From behind the retreating ships, a massive Vargathi war titan emerged, more powerful than anything they had ever faced. Its massive engines flared to life, and its cannons were aimed directly at the Fortitude. "This is it," Carter whispered to himself. They had to defeat the Titan, or the entire fleet would fall. He wasn't sure they had enough firepower to bring it down, but they had no choice. "Everyone focus fire on that Titan," Carter shouted. The Fortitude and the Allied ships opened fire, their combined efforts targeting the weak points in the War Titan's armor. Energy beams and missiles rained down on it, slowly chipping away at its defenses. The battle was brutal. The War Titan's weapons fired back with deadly precision, but the human ships, alongside the Threlk, fought with everything they had. It was a race against time. Would they break through the Titan's armor before it tore them apart? After what felt like an eternity, with one final coordinated shot from the Fortitude's main cannon, the War Titan exploded in a blinding flash, sending shockwaves throughout the battlefield. The Vargathi fleet finally began to retreat, their War Titan destroyed. The Alliance had won. Silence fell over the battlefield. The victory had been hard-won, but the enemy had been pushed back. The Vargathi would think twice before crossing the humans and their allies again. Captain Carter stood on the bridge, breathing heavily, looking at the burning remnants of the Vargathi fleet. For the first time in a long while, he allowed himself a smile. They had done it. They had defeated the greatest threat the galaxy had ever known. Together, they had protected the galaxy, and together, they would face whatever came next.